Welcome to another episode of the Multifamily Collective. Today, I believe we have a truly engaging and thought-provoking discussion on the evolving landscape of property management. Today, we're diving into the intersection between technology and human interaction and the overall customer experience. As we all know, the property management industry has seen tremendous shifts in recent years, and technology is advancing rapidly. New tools and platforms are emerging, and yet at the heart of all of it, the need for genuine human connection remains as critical as ever. In today's conversation, we're going to explore some of the key challenges and opportunities that come with this evolution. We discuss how companies can balance leveraging technology to streamline operations and maintain the personal touch that makes residents feel valued and connected to the community. So joining me today are two industry experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. First, we have Jennifer Carter, whose passion for creating personalized, memorable experience in property management is well known. Jennifer has advocated for shifting the reactive to proactive management, and she's here to share her insights on how we can elevate the resident experience to new heights. And we have Lindsay Martinez from Tourus, who's a forward-thinking leader at the forefront of integrating consumer success strategies into the multifamily industry. Lindsay's perspective on the role of leasing agents and tech and the delicate balance between efficiency, empathy, and add value to the depth that will add value to the depth of this discussion. Now, I will tell you, this is a wide-ranging discussion that we had. And really the through line is the consumer experience. And to some extent, there's a second through line, and that is the team member experience as it relates to the human element and the tech element as we start to see AI and other tech make its way into the multifamily industry. So grab your favorite cup of coffee and pull a chair up. Or if you eat popcorn, get it out of the microwave, pour it in a bowl, and let's get into it. Lindsay, Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
I did.
You are excited? It's Monday morning. Are you really excited, or are you just saying you're excited?
Well, I've had 3 cups of coffee, so I am great. And it's, almost lunchtime. So yeah, I'm great.
Best day of the week in the middle of the month. So
yeah, that's
excited for this.
It is
excited for this on a Monday morning.
Lindsay, have you had your coffee also?
I am in the middle of my first coffee.
First. Okay. Yeah. I am also on my third, Jennifer. I've not finished my third. I'm on my third.
Wow. And we're all in the same time zone, and you guys are on your third and on my first. All right.
Whoa.
Let's see if I can catch up.
Yep.
We're going to have an incredible conversation. whether it's caffeine induced or just the excitement of Monday morning or the excitement of being on this call and talking about this topic. Let's I want to kick off where this conversation is going to be a little bit all over the place as it relates to the human and technology or AI or any kind of PropTech introduced into the resident journey, or what we might otherwise call the voice of the customer being in the room when we're designing this stuff. So I wanted to start off on the topic of, certainly all of this gives us an ability and an opportunity to personalize conversation, right? So if you're collecting a bunch of data and personalized conversation, Lindsay, let's kick off with you. What do you think about how personalization entering into this conversation is going to change the dynamic, if it is?
Well, honestly, Mike, I think just hearing so much over the past year, over the past 2 years, kind of in a bifurcated way around this focus on personalization. How do we get to it? What kind of personalization? Can it be like a sweeping personalization where every prospect or renter has the same experience, but we want to make it hyper personalized in it feeling like it's hyper personalized, versus do we actually really want to focus on, okay, Mike drinks 3 cups of coffee before 11:30, and so does Jen, actually, even though they're not telling each other about that. So I think there's different levels of personalization, and I think it's time that we're really understanding how AI and tech can play into that. In light of our goals, do we want it to be really person focused, or do we want it to feel personalized at the group level?
Yeah, that makes sense. Jennifer, I know we've had some dialogue, the three of us independently and also as a group. You've talked about personalization. You've used some outside examples of that. How do you think about this?
I'm a huge proponent of personalization, but I think with the caveat of data, using the data that we have that's available to us to personalize. So getting down to the, let's say, second level, not just overall saying dear Jennifer, right? Like in an email and
Mm,
everybody just gets the auto name inserted there. I think it
right.
really comes down to learning about a prospect. Comes down learning about a resident and their likes and their dislikes and kind of what makes them tick, right? And what makes them who they are and what they like when it comes to who they are and where they live and in their resident experience.
I think that's a really important point, Jen, because one of the things that we've heard, that I've heard over the years, and that we've heard collectively, our team from leasing agents as well as their leadership, is that that's the information that they want, but there's no real easy way to capture it, right? It's like, okay, maybe a survey. During the tour, we want our teams to take notes, but then, you have back-to-back tours. How are you collecting that information? Where are you putting it? Are you putting it like in a data warehouse? Is there, a centralized, and what are you doing with it? So that's something that we really focus on too, especially during the tour, to understand what somebody likes, what they don't like. Let the leasing agent be that conduit for the information that we've not been able to get so far. So that's also our hope in general, is to assist with that personalization. Like, okay, we showed Jen 404 and she really liked the light, but she mentioned that she has two dogs and her kids do want separate rooms and one room could be turned into a nook. Just those little pieces of information that is really hard to get through any kind of like contact form or even phone conversation, and sometimes get lost after the tour. There's a lot of data there.
I want to take a bit of an off ramp because you so beautifully teed it up for me to do so. You talk about involving the leasing consultant in terms of data collection, right? But there's sort of let's just take a step before that. Before you have an opportunity to do data collection, you have to have some mechanism to create or collect that information, right? How important is it to have the leasing consultant, the voice of the leasing consultant, or any other team member in the room when you're making a decision to put technology in place to do data collection or anything for that matter? Lindsay, what do you think?
I always refer back to the information that we collect from the industry, because we're not running a multifamily operation. We're lucky enough to learn from a lot of people consistently. And in terms of best practices, one thing has really stood out that we've seen a lot of top performers implement in the past 1 to 2 years, and then also are looking to do in 2025, and essentially having leasing professionals, regional managers involved in the tech decisions. So turning them into a decision maker. And that's because of a few reasons. One, they're the end user. That's the most important. They're the end user. Are they going to adopt? Is it actually going to make their lives easier? And what is the onboarding experience that your tech provider's offering? Is it, a month free to the end users to just play with, understand, turn on,
Mm,
turn off, compare against their current process, and then getting to the point of sale, like signing a contract, having those end users in the conversation is just critical to the success, not only of the vendor at that portfolio, but how the portfolio or property is going to be able to benefit from that technology.
You know
So
what I
we
mean?
really encourage having the
mhm,
leasing involved.
I'm a stickler for going outside the industry to find information in comparison because I feel like some other industries do a great job of that. And it literally just dawned on me. Would you ever have your mom or dad go drive a car for you without you ever driving it before you get off the lot? Probably not, right? They're not the end user. Like as a car driver, I'm the end user and I want to sit in that car. I want to see how it works, how it drives and how it's goes, and I'm the end user. I would never have somebody and be like, Mike, can you go drive this car and then tell me how it works? And then be like, okay, you can buy it. And then he buys it and then I use it. Right. Like it just doesn't happen that way. So, I mean, if you want, Mike, we can do that. But it just makes me think of like, in every other certain circumstances, we as the end user are the ones that are using it. Right. I don't have somebody else go try on a pair of clothes and then be like, oh, they look great and I'm going to wear them. Like it just doesn't happen. Right. So like, why are we kind of doing the same or not doing the same thing in our industry? Maybe a good example, maybe not. I don't know.
No, I think it's a really good example, but I think it almost is a little bit more risky in this industry because the end users, and I'm talking, let's say right now, like we could keep property management software on the side, but like leasing and marketing software, it's not only about efficiency, but it's the insights gained from that software. So if your end users aren't using it, but that does lead into the question of like, well, maybe leasing and property end users are kind of the moment. Let's say maybe they're going to be fully automated or fully replaced. And we can kind of dig into that a little bit later, but as the industry currently is, like the end user, the leasing consultant, the leasing professional, they're the ones running the show. So how are we making sure that tech, that not only just tech, like any vendor that they need to interact with is set up for them and is giving them the most benefit?
There's an interesting opportunity to throw myself under the bus and kind of lump myself in with other people who sit in corporate offices. I did so prior, but the point that I would make is that there are people like me in the industry that go, I sit down with supplier partners and I'm like, wow, that thing is fantastic. I can totally see how that works. I can see how that's going to change the life of everyone, from the consumer to the team member to the business partner to the investor at the end of the day. But I don't take the time to actually involve all the voices, right? And the reason I don't do that is that is a lot of work. It's hard. It's hard work. It's a lot of work. We move at the speed of light anymore. So we don't, but it's valuable. So I'll throw myself under the bus and say it's not a good practice to not involve the voice of the customer. In this case, the team member. Let's get back on the thoroughfare that we were on just before we went off on that little off ramp. Can you share some specific examples, even if they're outside of the industry, where personalization happened to you and you were like, whoa, that's super cool? Or you've heard stories anecdotally that were super cool, and how you might be able to glean data and then put it to application in the way of a wow experience for a customer. Let's start with you, Lindsay.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to go back to the industry. That's the first thing that popped into my head. And I was actually talking with one customer, and, there was nothing automated or fancy about it, but the way that they follow up with tours is really pulling from the relationship that they made during that tour. And it's a luxury building based here in New York. So has all of the amenities. It's a beautiful, and it allows for like a very thoughtful tour because this is a high ticket and really luxury product. But those tours are typically 14 to 25 minutes. It can go anywhere between there, and you're learning a lot. You're building the relationship. And post tour, what they're doing is, they're taking notes, and then during the follow-ups, it's very specific about what they're doing, like addressing something about the prospect in the short term and then the long term. So, for example, you mentioned you were going to a restaurant. Hey, I hope you enjoyed X, Y, and Z. If you haven't gone yet, I know this really nice bar with a good cocktail nearby. Just kind of continuing the conversation that came up. And then long term, kind of like those static things. Like, we learned that you have 2 dogs. That wasn't in a contact form. We didn't get that in a guest card. So also addressing that and how your community relates back to that. And that kind of has been what drives the question around what kind of tools can support capturing that information. Because I was in leasing a long time ago in real estate. I was a rental broker, and it did a combination of things here in New York on the leasing side. And I remember very vividly, we had these like forms. It was like your contact intake form that I would have you sign and all these things. And I have my stack of forms, and it's just every little detail. Like during the tour, I'm like taking notes because I really had to move in between that prospect and the property that was going to be the best for them, and prospect B and the property that was going to be best for them, because they were looking for different things. And I do feel like that approach is very mimicked in scattered sites.
Sure.
when you're, managing leasing at multiple buildings, for example, and having to go. I think we're going to see that more and more, but really tracking and just like listening to the information, listening about that person, because understanding that person is going to help you place them more than understanding like, oh, I want a $5,000 one bedroom, that kind of criteria.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's in my head, the advancements in technology have certainly made data collection a little more efficient, where you were literally paper, whoops, pen,
Yeah.
paper,
Yeah.
taking notes, or you do it on a post-it note after you get back to the office and you put it on and you lose that, and then you've lost the opportunity to do personalization or to have any sort of wow moment in the follow-up. Jennifer, any stories from you as it relates to that?
I can't think of anything for me, but a couple of notes I would say is like there's software out there, and I haven't personally used it, but that does, I don't want to say scrape, but like tells you about like the person and their habits. I mean, that's how shopping
Oh,
happens, right? Or they know you want something, you're searching for something and something comes up and then it's like, oh, they knows about it. So I think that the opportunity to figure out the dots in between the big major points, right? Kind of thinking that resident journey of like digging in to get the dots in between, not just the one bedroom, the price, the dogs, or whatever, right? Like get the important stuff in between. Again, what makes them tick? What makes them who they are? And I will say this because this is one that's pretty neat to me. But Devin, who's on the marketing side in a property management company, Lusk, who is very well known in the industry, she, on a conversation with her, she always has told me, and I'll never forget it. And this is how I remember her. She likes pickles. So literally anytime I'm ever like out and I see stuff that's related to pickles, I just think of her. Right. And it's like, if you can do that from that angle about your prospects and something sticks out to you that you can't forget about, and then you use that in a follow up, or you use that when they become a resident, like that's called personalization, right? That is something that really is about them and that's of interest to them. So I think those kind of neat opportunities are really great.
Jen, that as soon as you said that, that also kind of brought to mind, and I don't want to, and Mike, forgive me for going off ramp again, but
no.
brand, like, how can that be flipped around, and how can portfolios learn from that kind of like memory association?
Mm.
How can portfolio ABC be like have a pickle that anytime I see them and I'm like I see something I'm like, oh right, because that's a great experience, or it's just something a little bit more unique that reminds you consistently whether you're moving or not, like in an omnipresent way.
That brought to mind uh, when I lived in St. Louis, worked for a local mom and pop property management company there. Wonderful organization, but the father developed a property in the Central West End, and he was insistent about this, but it had a clock tower on top of the building. It was literally protruded. It was like a 5-story wrap building, modern amenities, all the bells and whistles. But this clock, right? And the premise for this clock was that everyone will remember that property because it's the property with the clock, right? So
Yep.
we had this sort of tie to the clock, and everybody would refer to the property in any conversation, right? Whether they were renting an apartment or not, they would always talk about this property in the Central West End that had this big clock on the top of it. I want to switch gears. The human versus the AI and the technology, right? There's this big battle brewing. And I think that there are camps on both sides. There are camps in the middle. There are camps that are like, I have no idea what's going to happen with this, but I'll grab some popcorn and a soft drink, pull up and take a look at it. Lindsay, I want to hear what you think about this struggle between technology and humans.
Yeah, I think we're entering into I think we're going to look back at the past couple of years and be like, that was like, I wish we would have recognized it more as a learning experience versus trying to be super definitive about anything, because we have a really good opportunity to learn how technology and the human can work together. And I think long in this industry, there's kind of, there's been the voices that are like, we don't need the human right now. It's my opinion that we need the human right now. This is a relationship-based industry. Whether it's a 10-minute tour or I've known you for 20 years. But that's not to say there's not a place for technology to support, make the human more efficient, make their job easier, make it better. It's almost like we're speaking out of the same side of the mouth when we say, okay, like we can replace the leasing agent and we don't know why there's high turnover. How do we stop the high turnover? So which battle are we going after? And I think that's kind of a result of the tension, like you mentioned, Mike, this tension between what do we do with it? And we aren't accepting it as a learning experience. We're trying to make definitive answers. But something that has come up over and over again, that's come to this point, and on our team after being in the industry for so long. And we made this like jump with conversational AI, where it's like, okay, it's going to be the leasing consultant, leasing professional responding. Let's just have AI do the responding. And it works in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases, we don't know how it works and how it doesn't work. We don't have those numbers. We're not looking really critically at the conversion rates before, after. We're not, testing. But it's my perspective that we need to kind of test out the AI human relationship in a more human-centric way. How can the AI work with the leasing agent? So I like the way I visualize it. I think I showed you guys where it's like, okay, we've made this huge leap, but we need to make these little more incremental steps to really understand what the best way to work with, that the technology can work with our team. Because if we are from the perspective that we are caring about turnover, that this is a problem, that the leasing consultant should be a decision maker in tech conversations, then we're saying that they're not going to be automated right now, and we shouldn't be thinking about it from that perspective. So the way that we have fully focused our design is around the end user. So you can turn the AI on and off at a user level. There's full insight end to end from everybody in the team around summaries of like what's going on. And the leasing consultant's always in the loop. So they have full awareness of all of the conversations really, really easily. It's not 9 clicks to get to it. It's in their hand. And, I wonder in the past like 5 to 8 years, when we started, dipping our toes in the multifamily industry and this idea of AI, we went straight for the conversation versus the insights, like understanding what insights can be generated, how we can use this technology to, generate insights that actually might make everything more efficient. And we don't need to think about conversational AI. We don't know. So I'm glad to see that there's a lot of companies that are out there now that are really focused on the insight generation and the power of the technology to pull out data that we can use and take action on, and not necessarily just thinking of it in a silo where it's like, this is what should be communicating with prospects.
Jennifer, what I hear sort of broad strokes is, hey, we need to date a little bit before we actually get married. And so we need to take a little bit of insight from each one of those dates that we go on with this artificial intelligence and incorporate that feedback into our decision to ultimately get married to this, in this case, this technology. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't want to marry a robot right now. Okay, like, not into that.
Thank you for making that clear.
Yeah, making that clear. Yeah, and that's where, again, I think we need to go back to the smaller dots, right? Like, I mean, I use this example, and I've been thinking about this lately, is like, when we make a large goal, it ultimately fails when we jump from A to Z, right? Like, you have to take the small steps in order to get there and be consistent. And I think that's what we need to do here, right? Like, we need to have the small increments, the small chances, the small wins, right? You have a goal, but what do they call it? Milestones, right? What are the milestones to get there, right? What are those dates that we're doing in order, and then reevaluating that along.
Yeah, I like that. And I think, Lindsay, back to your point, what you sort of embedded in that answer or that statement was, you have a technology where, hey, look, if if I don't like what you said just now, I can kind of not answer the phone. I can turn that particular thing off, right? Until I get some more data where I feel like I'm fully informed and I'm making a decision in the best interest of the consumer or the best interest of my team member as it relates to how we're going to use this technology. Is
Yeah,
that a fair way to?
I would say so. And, even though like conversational technology that's come out in the past year is really like you can't beat this. It's amazing. We our tool allows you to not reach a dead end. So we look for flexibility with the prospect, but the way that we want to give control to the leasing agent is we want to be honest and we want to say, okay, post tour, I want to take over. I've built this relationship. I want to take over. If I need to, collect pay stubs or follow up with them about the application, AI can do that. But if I want to nurture the relationship, then I'm probably going to jump in with a little bit of my messaging. So, I don't want to say like here are the guidelines, but that's why we want to make it flexible. Use it as you see fit for the leasing agent, because what we kept hearing from a lot of people on the ground and also their leadership was like, the AI will talk to the prospect and then just hand, Lindsay, the leasing agent, okay, Mike Brewer is coming in on Tuesday. And it's like, well, there's the potential for a lot more context here to go back to the personalized touches, even at the beginning of the tour. Oh, Mike, here's some coffee. This is like bringing all of that back together. So it's ultimately about the control for how the salesperson, a leasing consultant is essentially a salesperson for what the salesperson needs.
That makes sense. I want to take a hard right. Now we're getting not just an off ramp, it's like turn right or left. We're going to talk about it's budget season, right? And we want to talk about proactivity, which was kind of embedded in what you just said. You want to be proactive in how you insert yourself or how you don't insert yourself in particular conversations, whether it's germane or not. But in budgeting, we talk about this sort of frustration that happens every year around this time. Guys like me and others like me, we tend to sort of take a T3 look back or a T1 look back or a T12 look back, and we sort of just budget on a go forward based on that historical data. But boy, there is a lot more work you could do to make that experience better. Jennifer, let's start with you this time. What do you think?
In regarding technology, like of like
Yes.
just kind of like slicing it out and adding it in.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
I think that's where, as an industry, I think we need to be more proactive and not reactive, right? Like, and I get it. We're all super busy. We're all, working a lot and where time is of essence. But I think in the long run, we have the opportunity to really dig through and be working at that opportunity to understand the value of what's being inserted. Because again, you can insert something or take it out and it can have a major effect, left or right. Right. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember is like, ultimately, to Lindsay's point, it's like, how is it actually going to affect the on-site teams? Right. Like, we can make all the decisions from a budget line item and take it out and add it back in and all this other stuff. But ultimately, as the implementation is the user, like, what are we doing? Because in the end, I think that's just causing more distress. And so I'm a proactive. I'm a long term. I like to start things way in advance. So like if I were doing the budget, I'd be back in July already, like looking to look at that. So that's a little bit from my perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And Lindsay, as it relates to tools, because I think Jennifer says a lot of good things there. In terms of being proactive, what kind of tools do you see out there? I know you're listening all the time. What kind of tools are shifting the mindset to be more proactive about a budgeting process and picking technology?
We've heard people kind of going through Q2, Q3. There was a surprising number of leadership that I heard that their main goal was tech consolidation for 2025. What can we get rid of? What do we need to add to get rid of things? Can something get rid of 2 to 4? It's like kind of 2 to 4 things is a sweet spot, but we all know that that's pretty challenging. But one of the interesting trends I kept hearing over and over again was that we'll take concessions. Like, it doesn't have to be one-to-one to the tool that we have. from a budget perspective and from an efficiency perspective, can we reduce logins for the team using it? Do we need to be paying, $4 a month for each of these point solutions? So a lot of workflows are on the chopping block, I believe, because there is now kind of a really intentional willingness to have those workflows be a little bit more manual again, or take off some of the bells and whistles.
That's right. You shared something recently with me, or maybe it was all of us, about call it a resident journey map. And I don't want to overuse that term. Maybe it's an overused term, but in terms of taking a step back with everything that you just said, right? Taking a step back and looking at the journey, how is that tool, even though it may be an overused term, is that tool important in the process, in your opinion?
I guess I'm going to come from a customer success perspective, and that's where my role has been in the industry until I founded Tourus, and I believe that that's like my most important role at Tourus as well. And customer success is something that's really interesting, and I talk with a lot of people on the multifamily side about how different strategies and interpretations of customer success as its own industry in a way can support on-site teams, leadership, thinking around how we want to give certain experiences to residents. But it came out from like B2B. So it's a very B2B approach, business to business. But in terms of the resident journey, to me, it really mirrors like a customer journey map. And I think it's all of these things are so great in theory, but how do you actually put it in practice? Like, who's involved? Do we use sticky notes? Do we use an Excel sheet? And I remember the first time I was like, okay, we're going to do a customer journey map. And I was like, that's not a good use of time. And it was actually one of the best uses of time. So, 15-year ago, Lindsay was wrong about that. Because it does seem where it's kind of like, I'm so busy, to your point. Jen's like, why do I have to? But how, I think when you understand like what it actually can entail, and then the outcomes, because it doesn't need to be a huge overhaul of any kind of strategy. But I guess I'll touch on what are some ways that somebody can even start with collecting this information. And there is, it's really important to have a combination of the qualitative and quantitative. So quantitative, we have box score reports. We have, any other report that you can pull from your property management software that tells you the story of your marketing performance to your retention performance. But, I believe that it's really important, especially if we're thinking about, the customer experience, which I know is a massive point of conversation in the industry right now. If we're thinking about the customer experience, how do we move them off of the spreadsheet? So one thing that I would recommend, and I have recommended, is essentially identifying your players. So we have leadership, C-suite, regionals. We have some on-site team members, and depending on how you want to target a resident journey map, that's who you're going to focus on. So is it property management or is it leasing? So let's just say that can vary. But it's really important to get them all involved in experiential listening. So C-level experiential listening, on-site, and everything in between. And that the point I recommend starting at is essentially a digital secret shop. Going through the whole process end to end and being very honest about what you're finding. You could enter that information in a Google form. It could be taken on notes in some way, and all aggregated and data pulled out. But one thing we do find, and I think that we should just be transparent about, is that often leasing consultants are entry-level positions, and going and telling COO Mike that X, Y, and Z is totally broken is a little bit scary. So being open to the idea that you can accept anonymous, experiential listening, digital secret shops, and maybe encouraging that, just to make on-site, and also other players who are could be a little bit more hesitant to give honest feedback, make it more comfortable.
Definitely. Anything come to mind for you on that point, Jennifer?
Well, I was trying to figure out how to switch my brain as she's talking because I used to work for Satisfact, so I'm very familiar with reports and surveys and data and the experiential. But on the other side of me, all I could think of was like when you're doing B2B, right? Which you can obviously relate to this, Lindsay. There's Gong, right? There's sales, right? There's that experiential piece that you're hearing. And how do we take that down to the leasing, which sometimes may be in person, which you're not seeing or able to over the phone or things like that. So I do think that the opportunity to create an open, transparent wavelength, right, where we can really feel comfortable as an industry to say this tech is not working, right, or I'm struggling here, or I haven't had enough implementation time, and really being open, because ultimately that's what's going to be helpful to everybody else in the company, as well as help, what's supposed to be happening on a day-to-day basis. Now, I do think on the other side of that all stems from leadership, right? And that's kind of something that I would think, Mike, you might agree with there too, right? Is like it stems from leadership to create that openness.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it is incumbent upon the leader, starting at the top, with the leader going first in creating that open environment, that safe environment where people can give feedback. I often think about, like in the Air Force, the Blue Angels, they do this every time they do a flight, right? They do this after action review, and they literally tear off the stripes, right? I may be a colonel, I may be a sergeant, I may be whatever rank, right? But they literally physically tear those things off of their flight suits and they set them down, and then they walk into a room. Nobody has rank over anyone else in that circumstance. And now we can talk freely. Now, flying a Blue Angel airplane, right, is highly dangerous. And it's important that you have candid conversations. But I would argue, in the respect of wanting to deliver excellent customer service, excellent team member experiences, excellent shareholder return experiences, right? You have to have that kind of candid conversation. You have to have an environment for that kind of candid conversation in your organization. So yes, it's on leadership, but it's also on, to Lindsay's point, it's also on the leasing consultant to feel comfortable, feeling uncomfortable in that environment, because you're still going to have that sort of stigma, right? I'm in the room with the big person. So yeah, it's incumbent upon both sides to show up. Absolutely. Definitely. Sure. Let's stay on the topic of team member experience for a second. How do you think what we're talking about today in a through line sort of adds up to better job satisfaction or better engagement from a team member's perspective? It could be leasing, it could be if you still have an assistant manager or property manager. How is this all adding up to a better team member experience?
Okay, I just need to jump in real quick, because Lindsay and I have had this conversation before. I don't know if she knows what I'm thinking, but I feel like when your on-site team members enjoy their job, are not blocked from doing their job every day, they're going to be a lot happier, right? And so when I say blocked, I mean, don't go to 10,000 apps, don't go and have 16 logins, right? When they freely can have the right tech to come in, feel comfortable and equipped and understand how to use it, then I think that they're going to be successful and have great a great customer, all of that, right? And great employee satisfaction, right? When I can download an app and I don't need somebody to show me how to use it, or it's just natural, right? Then I'm going to be more apt to use that device or that PropTech. So I don't know, Lindsay, would you agree? I mean, I feel like we kind of chatted a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And I think it also, align outside of the tech piece, but aligned with it is like feeling empowered. Like I am faced with a decision. We have the company rules, but this has to go outside of I am empowered to make this decision. This is within my purview. Especially because, and this is something I think we've also talked about, but this is a sales position. How do the most successful salespeople kind of get to the positions that they're at? they develop their voice, they learn different techniques. And that's why something that's really exciting to see are all these training positions getting a lot of attention, people flying around the country, not only training on the tech, but like training how to be a great salesperson. But yeah, like, can we make it frictionless? Can they not be blocked, and can they be empowered? And also, I don't know if this is necessarily, maybe this is a little controversial, but how do they see the next step in their career from where they are? If I go apply for a sales position right now at, let's say, I don't know, Disney, that's not something I've ever had any experience in. They're going to want so much background from me. I don't even know what I would be selling at Disney. Maybe ads, but they're going to want 15 years, X, Y, and Z. So when we think about who is on the front lines of these multi-million-dollar assets, they are salespeople. How do we give them the tools to be the best salespeople they could be? And how do we drive that line of sight to the next step in their careers?
Yeah, that is a huge topic today. It certainly, as it relates to AI and potentially eliminating a lot of the rote and routine work that is germane to whether it be leasing or assistant managers or property managers. All this task-oriented work is potentially going away, or at least being disappeared, put behind the scenes. And some of it's even DIY back on the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is that, how do I marry up, or using your term, how do I create that line of sight between what I'm doing today and exercising these skills and that next thing for me? You talked about at some point, as it relates to this, getting deeper into exercising deeper emotions into the consumer experience or the team member experience. Or how do you, and we're going to go back to training, I'm going to tie this to training and then we'll get a punchline. But what skills, kind of deeper emotional skill training, can you do with a leasing consultant or a property manager without crossing, when you start talking about eliciting or creating emotions in a consumer, there could be these blurred lines, but what are you specifically training on the soft skills side of the equation?
I mean, I feel like there's so many experts in this space.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll speak to kind of how we approach our leasing agents and property managers who use us from a sales perspective in some way. And at the end, and I guess I'll look back at my own real estate experience and what helped me be a sales leader. And I know that this is, it's not an uncommon thing, but it's very true. It's empathy.
Yeah.
And, not everybody has the same levels of empathy or understanding how to employ empathy. The empathy that I have in my personal life is probably a different type of empathy that I'm having in my work life. And I think that we're all like that, but it's almost about recognizing it and recognizing the different ways that you relate to people in a professional sense. In 5 minutes, in 25 minutes, so-and-so is moving from St. Louis. Oh my gosh. Okay. Here's what they could be experiencing. But understanding how your own personal empathy relates to the situation at hand. And in this case, I guess we'll talk about like leasing and residence. And I would say that's a very critical soft skill that's pretty universally shared by some of the best salespeople, because they're not selling you, they're consulting you. How do we balance, especially like, when you first learn how to sell, like, it's like, okay, get the lease, but you want to balance that with like, if this is not the best place for you, let's keep in touch. Maybe next year it will be, it's that short also versus long-term view of the relationship. But I feel like there's so much more there that I would love to hear from, like trainers in the industry on what they focus on when they're going to different markets and they're going to different roles within their portfolios.
I'll add 2 things. One, and this is all experiences that I've had in the industry. When I worked for rent, and I'll never forget it, back in 2009, so it's been almost 15 years. And it was one of the best trainings I ever did. And I wasn't directly a salesperson, but I was an account manager, customer success, who eventually ended up selling, right? And it was the psychology. We had a psychologist come in and understanding how the buyer buys. And I still to this day use it. right? Like I still to this day. So like to me, that's a soft skill that like anybody can understand and take that, right? Good, better, best mentality, or just we just had a whole book of
Give
training
us
for
the
like 2 hours.
tips, Jen.
Yeah.
Share, spill the beans.
And it was fantastic, right? That was one thing I will say in my career that was one of the great highlights. So, and the other one I would say is when I was a trainer for property management companies, one thing that I really did focus on, and it's definitely elevated now, but is who that other type of person is, right? We focus on like there's like 4 different types of person. There's like an A, a B, a bull, a lion, whatever. We call it, there's all sorts of things. And I'm still very passionate about that, right? Of like who and how they operate to understand. Because if you're gonna sell me, I want straight to the point bottom line, right?
Yeah.
Like the other day I was like, why isn't anybody answering me in GPT chat or not GPT on chat bot? Because I was like, I need an answer, right? Like I'm like, get me to the answer. Where other people are like, to your point, massage, right? Kind of coax me and then come back to me in 2-3 months. So I think
Mhm.
it's really about learning yourself, to your point, of where you fit in that situation, and then learning about the other person. So it's really just being aware of having that empathy and understanding that I'll leave you with this, not one size fits all, right? It's not one size fits all. That comes back to the personalization.
Yeah. So what I hear in all of this is sort of a through line is that there is a hybrid of experiences or a hybrid of tools that are necessary as we sort of segue to whether we're going to be human slash AI or AI complete, or maybe we go back old school and we're just human complete. And that's a differentiator in your business at some point. But it sounds like there's a through line as it relates to that. So let's call it balancing technology and humanity is really the big punchline here today.
Yeah,
Is that fair to say? How you would sum it up?
I think so. And Mike, can I take it quickly back to the resident journey
Yes,
map?
please.
Because if it's helpful, I would love to give teams a takeaway to understand actually where technology might be great and where it might not be great from the experience the customer is having with you. And typically the journey map that I've found to be helpful in multifamily is, you're looking at the renter's journey. What do they experience? So we have like actions, touch points, people, thoughts, feelings, and opportunity. So actions, what is the renter doing? What does the touch points? What is it the renter interact with? People, who or what do they interact with? And what are they thinking? So that's where, when you're doing your own kind of secret shop and understanding the renter's experience, that's where I think that really fits into kind of being honest, like, what are you feeling? Are you like, this stinks? Or it's like, well, actually that wasn't as bad. Being capturing that. Um and then opportunities, what can be improved, and those are kind of better distilled collectively when you have the information. But I always recommend on the resident journey starting with, all right, get everybody in the team involved, like Lindsay the
Yeah.
leasing agent, Jen head of marketing, Mike COO. And you could even start simple touch points. What does the renter interact with? And thoughts and feelings. All right, how I am engaging with the chatbot at 123 Main Street. That is my touch point. I think that this is slow and I'm feeling frustrated.
Hmm.
Perfect. And then together you bring that information, all of the insights, and then we can piece together the patterns that we're seeing to most easily identify the opportunities. And then you want to prioritize the opportunities, obviously, because there's always endless opportunities, but like what's going to
Yes.
have the biggest impact. But it doesn't have to be an intimidating exercise. It can actually be really fun and a good bonding experience for the team.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think you're right as it relates to that, and sort of tying that back to the experiential moment. There are experiences certainly that you consider for the consumer, but I'm familiar with a company that would run all of their leasing consultants through the actual exercise of leasing an apartment with the particular
Mm,
company that they worked for, right?
yeah.
And literally would hand them money, go rent our apartment, right, and run them through the entire process. So that, getting back to your point, you had a real life
Mm,
experience that you could draw from to inform that discussion that you're talking about.
I
that's
love
fabulous.
that. I
Love
love
that.
that.
Very
And maybe we can chat again and we can talk about Dolly Parton and um,
Oh, yeah.
and the rock and the voice of the customer,
Yeah.
because that reminds me of that.
That was, yeah, that'll be a little tease for a future episode. How about
Perfect.
that?
Perfect.
Well, before we sort of tie this conversation up, I want to add, is there anything that I haven't asked or that we haven't touched on that you would like to communicate, and then sort of tie that off with where can people find out more about you or your organization?
I think we kind of hit on so many topics, and yeah, I guess I would just kind of drive home the point of thinking about how we marry qualitative and quantitative pieces of information together to understand opportunities, whether it's from a customer experience, whether it's from our team's experience, and the tools that do that. And, that's something that we are fully focused on, both on the on-site team side and the resident/customer experience side. But this has been so fun and wonderful. You can find us at Tourus, TOURUS.io, or Lindsay Martinez on LinkedIn, or Lindsay, LINDSAY, at Tourus.io. I would love to hear any questions or thoughts. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. Jennifer, anything to tie up from you?
Keep listening. Listen to your customer, listen to your resident, listen, and then take action. And then you'll be able to close some gaps, is what I would say.
Jennifer, it's been a pleasure. Lindsay, it is an absolute pleasure each and every time we get to communicate with you. So thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
Thank you. It's been fun.